The first time I saw my brother's launch video, I was standing in a hospital corridor with a paper cup of coffee going cold in my hand. The screen above the reception desk was showing a business channel. Behind the anchor was a photograph of HavenLoop's new launch event. A silver stage, a blue logo, and my brother Joon, smiling as if he had personally invented the future. Under his name, the caption read, Joon Han, Founder and Chief Executive Officer. I watched the clip twice before I understood why the room felt suddenly airless. HavenLoop was the app I had designed after our mother's stroke. It was supposed to help families coordinate medication, transport, meals, and the small emergencies that turn a normal week into a crisis. The first version had run on my battered laptop while I slept in a plastic chair beside my mother's bed. The anchor called it a compassionate breakthrough. Joon called it a product born from our family's experience. He never said my name. I had been invited to the launch, technically, 3 days earlier. Joon had sent a message saying the event was mostly investor-facing, and that my presence might confuse the positioning. He said the company needed one clear founder voice. Then he asked me to forward the latest design files because the product team had found a few minor inconsistencies. Benches. I had not forwarded anything. I had already seen the new onboarding screen in a leaked press kit. The word creator had been replaced with founder, my signature color. The pale green I chose because hospitals use too much white had been changed to Joon's navy. Even the tiny line of text on the emergency screen had been rewritten. I had written, call the person who knows what matters. Thunder's team changed it to care, organized. When the video ended, a nurse beside me said, your brother is famous now. I smiled because I did not know how to explain that fame was not the worst part. The worst part was the neatness of the theft. Nothing had been smashed. Nothing looked stolen. The app was still working. The colors were still beautiful. The investors were still clapping. My brother had simply removed the only evidence that I had built it. That evening, I went to the HavenLoop launch office. The receptionist looked at my ID, then at the guest list, then called security. Joon appeared from the glass conference room wearing the same charcoal suit from the broadcast. You shouldn't have come here, he said. I'm listed as product consultant on the original incorporation documents. Original documents are not the current documents. He said it softly, like a doctor delivering a diagnosis. That softness made the lie more dangerous. I asked for the company's source repository and the investor data room. He laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because he had already decided I was emotional. You helped with a prototype, he said. That does not make you the founder. The security guard stepped closer. I looked through the glass wall at the employees inside. Most of them had joined after launch. A few had used my early wireframes. None of them met my eyes. I left without arguing. On the train home, I opened an old folder on my phone. The folder contained a photograph of my mother's hospital blanket, a medication schedule, and the first sketch of HavenLoop drawn on a receipt. At the bottom of the receipt, Joon had written a sentence in blue ink. If this works, people will know you made it. He had forgotten that he wrote it. I had not. By midnight, I had made one decision. I would not fight him in a hallway or on social media. I would not beg the investors to believe a sister who sounded hurt. I would let the system he had used to erase me reveal the order of events. I opened the old development drive and found the first repository export. The commit log was still there. Protected by the kind of timestamps nobody notices until money is at stake. The earliest commit was labeled EHAN-0001. My initials. My date. My code. I printed the log, put the pages in a folder, and wrote one line on the cover. Let the source speak. Before HavenLoop became a company, it was a list taped to our mother's hospital wall. She had suffered a stroke on a rainy Tuesday. The first week was a blur of doctors, forms, plastic trays, and phone calls. Joon was working at his advertising agency and could not take time off. My father was recovering from knee surgery. I was the only person who could stay overnight. The hospital gave us a printed care plan, but the plan assumed that one person would remember everything. Medication changed by the hour. Physical therapy moved from Tuesday to Wednesday. A social worker left a voicemail with a number nobody wrote down. Relatives kept texting the same questions. Is she eating? What did the doctor say? Who is visiting tomorrow? I started a spreadsheet on my laptop. I made columns for medicine, dosage, appointment, driver, visitor, and warning. Then I added a color code so my father could understand it without reading the notes. Green meant completed. Yellow meant waiting. Red meant someone had to act before the next shift. The sheet worked, but it was fragile. If my laptop battery died, the whole system disappeared. If Joon changed one line, my copy stayed wrong. I needed something that treated care as a shared responsibility instead of a private memory. I began building a mobile prototype after midnight. I called the first folder Haven because I wanted the app to feel like a place where a family could set down its panic. The loop came later. A crisis moved in circles: medicine, transport, food, rest, and back again. The first person to test it was Dawn Park, an engineer who had shared my hospital cafeteria table. Dawn had been visiting her grandfather on another floor. She understood why the buttons needed to be large and why an alert should say what to do, not merely announce that something was wrong. We worked in silence most nights. I wrote the user flows, Dawn wrote the synchronization layer. We argued about whether a reminder should disappear after someone checked it. I said no, because a completed action needed a history. Dawn said the history could become a record of blame. We designed a neutral status: done, by whom, at what time. Joon visited one night carrying convenience store coffee. He looked at the prototype and asked how much it would cost to build. Nothing, if we keep it small. I said, small tools don't get investment. Benches. It isn't an investment pitch. It's for families like ours. He leaned over the laptop. Families like ours will not pay for a spreadsheet with buttons. You need a story. I thought he meant the story of care. He meant the story of a founder. 2 weeks later, he arranged a meeting with an angel investor named Yoojin So. Joon introduced me as the product brain. I corrected him and said I was the creator. He squeezed my shoulder under the table, a warning disguised as affection. Yoojin asked who owned the code. I said the three of us had signed a simple collaboration agreement and that I was preparing a formal company structure. Joon answered before I could explain the details. The company will own everything once we incorporate, he said. That sentence became important later. At the time, it sounded like an ordinary next step. I signed the NDA he placed in front of me because the hospital monitor was beeping, and my mother was calling my name from the bed. The agreement identified me as a product collaborator, not an employee, and it required written approval before any public use of my work. Joon told me the labels were temporary. He said the real documents would be cleaned up after the first funding round. There was never a cleanup. There was only a succession of replacements. The prototype became a pilot. The pilot became a deck. The deck became a company. Each time the name of the creator moved farther from the screen, I kept building because patients were using the tool. A mother in Busan sent a message saying the medication history had helped her challenge a pharmacy error. A son in Daegu said the shared transport calendar kept his father from missing dialysis. Those messages made the work feel larger than our family's dispute. Joon knew that. He also knew the investors wanted a simple image, one decisive founder, one clean origin story, one person who could stand on stage and promise scale. The origin story he chose was not false in every detail. He had found the first investor. He had negotiated the pilot. He had taken meetings while I stayed beside my mother. But he had not written the code, designed the care logic, or tested the app with shaking hands at 3 a.m. He had provided the microphone. He had not written the song. The first warning came from an engineer who did not know she was warning me. Her name was Mira Cho, and she had joined HavenLoop's mobile team 2 months before the launch. She sent me a message asking whether the original credit page had always listed 3 creators. I replied, "Which page?" She attached a screenshot. It showed a hidden route in the staging app, /about/origin. The page had a pale green background and 3 names, Joon Han, Daeun Park, and Joon Han. Beneath the names was a sentence I had written, built beside a hospital bed, for every family that has to become a care team overnight. The screenshot was dated 6 weeks earlier. The current version had no origin page. I asked Mira where she found it. She said a senior developer had told her to remove the root before the public release. The developer had called it legacy copy. Mira thought I might know why. I saved the screenshot in 3 places and asked whether the deletion had been recorded in the issue tracker. She stopped replying for 2 days. When she finally answered, she said her manager had asked her not to discuss internal files with former collaborators. Former collaborator. The phrase appeared in my inbox like a legal status. I contacted the company secretary and requested the current cap table, board minutes, and any assignment documents bearing my signature. The secretary replied with a standard message, HavenLoop cannot share confidential corporate materials with non-authorized parties. I was not a non-authorized party when I signed the prototype NDA. I was a non-authorized party when they needed to erase me. The next morning, I visited the small law office that had helped me register the original design. Attorney Choi Hyun listened without interrupting. He did not promise a victory. He asked for dates. When did you first write the code? October 8th, 3 years ago. When did Joon first claim ownership publicly? The launch broadcast, last week. When did you transfer the rights? I never did. Choi asked me to show him the NDA. He read the paragraph about written approval. Then he asked for the repository history. Do not edit anything, he said. Do not log in and change passwords. Do not download more than you already have access to. We need the records as they existed. I told him I had an exported log from the original development drive. Good. Preserve the metadata. The difference between a screenshot and a verifiable export can decide whether people believe you. He also told me not to underestimate the deleted credit page. If the page had existed in staging, someone had created it, reviewed it, and removed it. Each action left a trail. That evening, Daeun came to my apartment. She had been silent since the launch. She placed a small encrypted drive on the table. I kept my own mirror, she said. I stared at her. Why? Because I knew this would happen. Daeun had copied the repository when Joon's team migrated it from the original server. The mirror contained commit history, pull requests, code review comments, and a deleted branch called Origin Credits. In that branch, Joon had written a message: remove creator language before investor demo, keep family story, position founder as JH. The letters JH were not ambiguous. They were the initials of the person presenting himself as the sole inventor. Daeun's hands shook when she opened the file. She did not want to hurt Joon. She wanted the company to survive. That distinction mattered. People often imagine whistleblowers as enemies waiting for a dramatic moment. Daeun was simply someone who had kept a backup because she knew teams change their stories when money enters the room. We compared her mirror with my export. The earliest commit, EHAN-0001, was mine. It created the care event schema. The second, DPAK-0002, added synchronization. Joon's first technical commit appeared weeks later and changed the color palette. His first product note said, "Make the founder dashboard more impressive." I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired. The evidence showed that my brother had not made one mistake. He had built a process that turned my work into his biography. The review team asked me to reconstruct the first month of development in detail. That request sounded simple until I opened my old calendar. The entries were not written like business records, they said. Change dosage button after mom sleeps. Stimulates, ask nurse about wheelchair ramp. And Daeun fixed the blue alert. Jisnani let a piece of the product that the launch deck had flattened into a single sentence. I brought the calendar to Choi. He asked me to explain why each note mattered. I described the first alert. A patient's family had received a generic notification that said a medicine task was overdue. They did not know whether the medicine had been missed, refused, or delayed by a nurse. I changed the alert so it named the status and the next person responsible. That tiny decision became the basis of HavenLoop's escalation system. I described the visitor module. My father had once arrived at the hospital while my aunt was already there, and both of them believed the other had brought the discharge papers. The app began tracking not only appointments, but ownership of each task. That was why the checkmark could not disappear. A family needed to know who had completed an action and when. I described the language test. My mother understood Korean better than English, while some of her younger caregivers used English medical terms. We tested every label in both languages and removed words that sounded like commands. Confirm became, "I have done this." The change made the interface warmer, but it also reduced a dangerous misunderstanding. The review team matched my notes with code comments. The same phrases appeared in the repository. "Who owns the next step?" was in a design note. "Do not hide completed history" was in a test case. The history had survived because the code carried the reasoning, even when the public story did not. Juna's team argued that business leadership had shaped the product as much as code. I agreed. The investors needed to know that the correction was not an attempt to erase his contribution. I prepared a second chart showing the launch work he had done, the pilot contract, the first hospital partnership, the pricing model, and the hiring plan. When I presented the chart, Han Sol asked why I was helping the board defend Joon. I am not defending him. I said, I am making the record too accurate to dismiss. Thieves. That sentence became the principle of the review. Every name had to stay attached to the work it actually performed. Choi advised me to approach the investors privately before going public. Yoo Seo had backed HavenLoop from the beginning. If the investors learned about the missing credit from a viral post, they would defend the company first and investigate second. I agreed. I drafted a short letter with no insults, no adjectives, and no demand for an apology. I asked for a neutral review of the source history, the NDA, and the credit page deletion. Joon replied in 11 minutes. You are confusing personal contribution with corporate ownership. Please stop escalating this. I read the sentence until its meaning became clear. He was not denying that I had contributed. He was claiming contribution was irrelevant. That was when I decided the investors should see the source log themselves. Before the meeting, I visited the hospital where HavenLoop had first been tested. The pilot coordinator, Nurse Yoon, still kept a printed feedback binder. She remembered me because I had arrived with a laptop, 3 extension cords, and an apology for asking nurses to test software during their breaks. Nurse Yoon opened the binder and found a page dated October 21st. It contained a handwritten note. "Unha changed the alert after my night shift. We can finally tell whether the family saw the message." The note was not a contract. It was not a patent. It was a contemporaneous account from the person who used the tool when nobody was watching. She also remembered Joon. He had come to the pilot once with a camera crew and asked whether the hospital could provide a quote about innovation. Nurse Yoon had refused to film patients. She said Joon was polite, but he left before the night shift began. I asked whether she would be willing to speak to the review team. She said yes, provided the hospital names were protected. Her testimony established something important. Joon's role was visible in the launch process, while mine was visible in the product's daily use. The two kinds of work were different, and the company had confused them for convenience. At home, I organized the evidence into 4 folders: creation, collaboration, public claims, and remedy. I printed a cover sheet for each folder and wrote the source, date, and reason it mattered. Choi had warned me that emotional statements would be easy to attack. A disciplined archive gave the story a spine. I found one more document in an old email account, a message Joon sent to me after the first hospital pilot. It said, "You built the part people will trust. I will make sure they can find it." The phrase was generous at the time. In the launch deck, it had become, "I built the platform people can trust," unresolved. The difference was 7 words and an entire history. Yoojin Saw agreed to meet in a neutral office near the river. She arrived with 2 other investors and an operations director named Han Sol. Joon arrived 10 minutes late, accompanied by the company counsel. The room had a large screen and a long table. It looked like a smaller version of the launch venue, without the cameras. Yoojin opened the meeting by saying she wanted clarity, not spectacle. She asked me to explain my claim in 5 minutes. I said HavenLoop's public launch identified Joon as the sole founder. I said the app's core architecture, original design, and care workflow existed before the company was incorporated. I said I had never signed an assignment transferring my work to Joon personally or to HavenLoop. I did not say he had stolen my app. I said the company's public account contradicted its own technical records. Joon's counsel objected to the word contradicted. Yoojin told him to let me finish. I connected Daeun's mirror to the screen. The repository opened with a timeline. Each commit had an author, a timestamp, a message, and a hash. The first line read EHAN-0001. Joon shifted in his chair. "Commit authorship can be manipulated," his counsel said. "Yes," I existed. "That is why I brought 3 independent records." I showed the original server export, Daeun's mirror, and a code review email from the hospital pilot. The email was addressed to me, and the attachment contained the same care event schema. The file had been sent before Joon's first technical commit. Han Sol asked whether Joon had ever contributed to the product. He contributed to fundraising, partnerships, and later product positioning. I said, "Those are real contributions. They are not the same as creating the original system. Patriotism." Yoojin looked at Joon. "Why did the launch materials call you the founder?" Joon said the company needed one founder for simplicity. Did the company ask Unha to approve that language? We discussed it informally. Do you have written approval? He did not answer. His counsel said the origin was a family matter and should not determine corporate governance. Yoojin replied that the issue was not family history. It was whether the company had presented an inaccurate ownership story to investors and customers. I opened the deleted branch. The screen displayed the message about removing creator language. The room became very quiet. Joon leaned forward. That branch was a draft. It was never merged. Cousins, the public page changed after that draft. I said, the page changed because marketing updated the copy. Who instructed marketing? He looked at his counsel. Yoojin stopped him. Answer the question. Joon said he did not remember. I expected anger. Instead, I felt the strange calm that comes when a person's memory becomes a shield too obvious to use. Han Sol asked for the NDA. I put it on the table. The clause requiring written approval before public use was highlighted. The company counsel claimed the clause applied only to confidential materials, not ordinary product descriptions. Trae Hyun, who had joined by video, asked whether the launch description called the app a product born from Joon's personal experience. The counsel said yes. Then it used the family story publicly. Choi said, the question is whether the company used Eunha's work and story without the approval required by the agreement. Yoojin requested that the screen remain on the source log. She asked Daeun to explain the technical entries in plain language. Daeun described the care event schema, the synchronization layer, the emergency escalation rule, and the original accessibility testing. She identified which commits were mine, which were hers, and which were Joon's. She did not exaggerate. When a feature had been improved by Joon's team, she said so. That honesty made the record stronger. The investors did not need a perfect hero. They needed a reliable chain of authorship. At the end of the meeting, Yoojin paused the next funding draw and called for an independent review. She also asked the company to preserve every repository, data room document, and marketing revision. Joon stood so quickly, his chair struck the wall. You are freezing the company because my sister is upset, he said. Yoojina's expression did not change. I am freezing the draw because your company's records may not match its public claims. For the first time, he looked at me without the expression of an older brother correcting a younger one. He looked at me as a witness. The independent review began with the investor data room. The data room was a secure folder containing the materials used for the second funding round. Joon's team had forgotten that old versions were automatically retained. The review team found a PDF titled HavenLoop Origin Story V3. The current presentation began with Joon's photograph. Version 3 began with a photograph of my mother's hospital corridor and a paragraph naming me as creator. The file had comments from the marketing director. One comment read, investors respond better to a single founder narrative. Another read, keep Eunha's name in internal history, not on the public slide. Turbulent, the comments did not prove who ordered the change. They proved the erasure was deliberate. The team also found a draft cap table in which Joon held founder shares and I held advisory options. The options had never been executed. There was no signature from me. The document had been uploaded to the data room as if it were final. I asked whether the investors had relied on it. Han Sol said the financing committee had reviewed the draft, but had not noticed the missing execution page. That discovery changed the case from a credit dispute into a governance problem. If my rights had been represented inaccurately, the company's funding documents might also be defective. Joon called me after the review. His voice was low. You wanted attention. You have it now. I wanted an accurate record. You are destroying the company we built. We did build a company. You did not build the app alone. Threatened. There was a pause. You always needed to be recognized. The sentence sounded personal, but it was also strategic. If he could make recognition look like vanity, the evidence would become a personality conflict. I answered carefully. Recognition is not the remedy. Attribution and ownership are separate. I am asking the company to correct both. He hung up. The review team interviewed employees. Mira Cho confirmed that she had been told to remove the origin page. A product manager said the phrase "founder dashboard" had been changed from Creator Dashboard, unrestricted, during a presentation rehearsal. A finance employee produced an email instructing staff to route questions about the app's origins to Joon only. Daeun's interview was the hardest. She said the original collaboration agreement gave the three of us equal approval over public descriptions of the prototype. Joon's counsel asked whether she had ever objected when his title changed. "I was afraid," Daeun said. The room went still. Fear was not a technical fact, but it explained why the record had survived only in private mirrors and forgotten versions. The review also found a patent disclosure. The disclosure named me as the inventor of the care event synchronization method. Joon had signed as company representative, not inventor. The patent filing had been delayed because the company wanted to revise the claims. The patent file led us to a second technical record.
During the first pilot,
The hospital network had lost its connection for 40 minutes.
most apps would have shown an error and waited.
Our system stored the action locally, marked it as pending, and synchronized it when the connection returned.
I had written that requirement after watching a nurse carry a phone into an elevator and lose a medication update between floors.
The review team asked who had designed the offline rule. The answer was in a comment attached to EHAN-0001. A family cannot be punished because the signal disappeared. My language was not marketing language. It was a design constraint tied to a real failure. Juna's launch deck described the offline mode as his resilience architecture. He had commissioned the feature's later scaling work, but he had not written the original constraint. The difference between invention and implementation was exactly what the board needed to understand. Daeun recreated the early test using an old phone. She turned off the network, checked a medication task, and walked down the hospital stairwell. When the signal returned, the task synchronized with the correct time and user. The demonstration was simple, but it made the authorship visible. The feature existed because someone had noticed a patient care problem before anyone called the product a company. I asked Daeun whether she wanted her name on the public page. She said yes, but only if the page also named the nurses who gave feedback. We added a section for field contributors. It listed no private patient data, only the roles that had shaped the product. That decision caused a new argument. Marketing said the page had become too complicated. I said the product was complicated because care was complicated. A clean story was not automatically a truthful story. The board finally understood that the dispute was about more than my brother's title. A company that erased the reasoning behind a safety feature could eventually erase the warning itself. Attribution was part of product safety. That document made the public launch especially difficult to defend. The company's own intellectual property file recognized the distinction between the person who invented a method and the executive who presented it. Yoojin asked Joon to step aside temporarily while the review continued. He refused. The board voted to suspend his public spokesperson role, but allowed him to remain in operations under supervision. He called a family meeting that night. My father sat at the end of the table. My mother, now able to walk with a cane, listened beside him. Joon brought printed charts showing HavenLoop's revenue, user growth, and investor commitments. If this investigation continues, he said, the company may collapse. Yeah, I looked at the charts. Every number represented families using the system. That was the pressure he wanted to place on me. If I defended my name, I would be hurting the people the app served. I asked whether he believed the company should survive by keeping false records. He said survival came first. My mother spoke for the first time. When I was in the hospital, Unha wrote down every mistake so nobody could repeat it. Joon said this was not the hospital. Then why are you afraid of the record? She asked. He had no answer. The family meeting ended without reconciliation. But my mother's question traveled farther than any accusation. It became the sentence I carried into the next board session. The next board session included an employee listening period. People submitted questions anonymously, and the chair read them aloud. One engineer asked whether speaking honestly about authorship would damage her career. A designer asked whether a manager could rename her work during a promotion review. A support specialist asked whether customer feedback had any owner at all. The room had been built for investors, but the questions turned it into a workplace hearing. Joon tried to answer by saying the company had moved too quickly. Yoojin asked him why speed required deleting a credit page rather than postponing the launch. He said the page was not material to the product. Mira Cho stood up. She had never spoken at a board meeting before. She said that the page had been material to her decision to join. She had believed HavenLoop respected the people who did invisible work. When the page vanished, she understood that recognition depended on rank. No one interrupted her. The silence was different from the silence in the investor meeting. It was not shock. It was recognition. The board adopted a temporary rule that no historical attribution could be removed during a product release without a recorded review. The rule applied to everyone, including me. I supported it because a protection that depended on my personality would disappear when I left. We also created a confidential channel for employees to preserve disputed drafts. The channel did not publish private materials. It kept a time-stamped record so a person could prove that a change had occurred without leaking customer information. After the meeting, a junior engineer named Sojin asked to speak with me. She said she had been assigned a feature that came from a customer complaint. Her manager had told her not to mention the customer because the story made the company look less innovative. "What did you do?" I asked. "I kept the ticket." I told her to keep the ticket, and the reason it mattered? A product history should show the problem before it celebrates the solution. That night, I wrote a new line in the governance policy. Every polished launch must retain a visible path back to the unpolished need. Sounded less like law and more like a promise, but it became the sentence people remembered. The board review lasted 3 weeks. The final report was not a dramatic verdict. It was a sequence of findings. Finding 1. I had created the original product concept and core care event schema before incorporation. Finding 2. Daeun had built the synchronization layer under the collaboration agreement. Finding 3. Joon had contributed material fundraising, partnership, and later management work. But the company's launch materials overstated his technical authorship. Finding 4. The company had removed the origin page and altered internal records without obtaining the written approval required by the NDA. Finding 5. The founder share document in the data room was incomplete and should not have been represented as final. The report did not call Joon a thief. It did not call me the sole founder. It described what the records could support. That restraint mattered. A source log does not choose a hero. It preserves sequence. The board proposed a settlement and a governance repair. I would receive inventor recognition.
A defined equity grant based on the original contribution.
And control over the historical attribution page. Daeun would receive corresponding recognition and equity. Joon would retain an executive role only if he accepted a public correction and an independent chair. The first settlement draft arrived with a clean table of numbers. It valued my contribution at a percentage calculated from the company's current revenue, then offered a smaller percentage in exchange for a release of every future claim. The document was efficient and insulting. It treated the past as a line item and the future as something I should surrender before the company had even finished correcting the present. Choi asked me to separate what I needed from what I wanted. I wrote 3 columns on a whiteboard. In the first column, I wrote legal recognition, inventor status, ownership of the original code, and a correction to the investor materials. In the second, I wrote governance, a board seat or an independent process that could not be controlled by Joon. In the third, I wrote personal repair, an apology, an explanation to our parents, and a promise that my mother's illness would never again be used as a marketing prop without consent. Choi told me the third column might never arrive. He said a settlement could force a correction, but it could not force a person to understand what he had done. I crossed out apology from the list of conditions, not because it was unimportant, but because I did not want the company's users to wait for my brother's character to improve. The product needed a truthful record, whether or not he became generous. The equity discussion became more complicated when the investors disclosed that Joon had used his founder title to negotiate a personal loan secured against his shares if the board reduced his title or changed the cap table. The lender could demand repayment. Joon argued that my claim threatened not only HavenLoop, but his home. I asked Yoojin whether the loan had been disclosed accurately. She said the lender had received the same founder share draft that appeared in the data room. The incomplete document had created risk for everyone. This was the moment I understood how an inaccurate story spreads. A false title becomes a slide. The slide becomes a financing document. The document becomes a loan. Then every person who benefited from the original shortcut says the truth is too expensive to restore. I refused to accept responsibility for the cost of keeping the shortcut. The board commissioned an independent valuation of the early intellectual property. The evaluator did not assign a magical number to creativity. She mapped the original code, the later changes, the revenue attached to the care event engine, and the role of each contributor. Her report gave the board a defensible basis for the equity grant. Daeun asked to see the report before signing. She was worried that our names would be used to justify a new division between engineering and product. We requested language stating that authorship did not depend on department, rank, or whether a contribution appeared in a public demo. The revised settlement also created a contributor pool for future features. If an employee solved a major customer problem, the company would record the contribution and offer an equity or bonus decision through a committee, rather than leaving recognition to the CEO's memory. When I read that clause, I thought of Sojin's saved customer ticket. The policy would not make every manager fair. It would make unfairness easier to prove. Joon still refused to apologize. He said the correction was enough. I told him I agreed that the correction mattered more than a performance of remorse. That answer surprised him. He had expected me to keep bargaining for an emotional victory. There was no emotional victory. There was a set of records that could survive without one. The final agreement gave me a voting stake, inventor recognition, and a formal role on the Care Council. Daeun received the same recognition for the synchronization system. The company amended the cap table and notified the lender. Joon lost the CEO title, but kept a transition role until the new leadership team was trained. The agreement did not make us equal in the way a childhood promise might have imagined. It made the unequal history legible. That was enough to build a fairer next step. I rejected the first draft. It offered money, but described the correction as a family clarification. Shutting that phrase would have turned a corporate misrepresentation into a private misunderstanding. I asked for 6 changes. First, the launch page had to name the original creators and describe their work accurately. Second, the company had to file a corrected invention disclosure. Third, the cap table and investor materials had to be amended, with notice to every investor who had relied on the earlier version. Fourth, the company had to create a repository preservation policy so no executive could delete a historical branch without an audit trail. Fifth, the Care Council had to include patients and family caregivers, not only investors. Sixth, Joon had to acknowledge the public error in his own voice. The board accepted the first 5. Joon refused the 6th. He argued that a public apology would damage his authority. I told him authority built on an inaccurate origin story was already damaged. The investors gave him a deadline. If he would not correct the record, he would lose the CEO title. On the final day, Joon asked to see me alone. We met in the old hospital cafeteria, the place where Daeun and I had first tested the prototype. He looked older than he had at the launch. Not weaker, just less protected by the room around him. I thought I was carrying the company, he said. You were carrying the company's public image. That is carrying it. It is one kind of carrying. It is not the same as carrying the knights. He looked at the table. If I had put your name on the first deck, investors would have asked whether you could lead. You were in the hospital. You were exhausted. I thought I was protecting you. You protected the company from knowing me. He said he had planned to give me shares later. Later is not an agreement. I said, it is a promise people use when they want the present without consequences. Then, he did not apologize. He said he was sorry the situation had become public. That was not enough. I told him I would accept the governance repair even if he refused the apology. The record did not depend on his regret. The negotiation over the correction lasted another week because every adjective carried a consequence. The investors wanted to say the company had clarified its founding story. Che argued that clarified implied the old story had been incomplete by accident. I wanted the correction to say that the launch materials had inaccurately presented a single founder narrative, and that the company had failed to obtain written approval for the public use of my work. Joon objected to the word inaccurately. He said it sounded like an admission of fraud. Yoojin answered that the board was not writing a criminal indictment. It was writing a corporate record. If the word was accurate, the company could not reject it merely because it was uncomfortable. The final language named the original product creator, the systems engineer, and the founding operator. It described the hospital pilot, the later fundraising, and the process by which the public materials had been changed. It included a link to the source log archive, with sensitive code removed, but hashes and dates preserved. I read the correction 3 times. The first time, I looked for my name. The second time, I looked for Daeun's. The third time, I looked for a sentence that would turn the whole dispute into a family quarrel. It was not there. When the page went live, the company's support inbox received questions from customers. Some asked whether their data was safe. Some asked who controlled the company. The Care Council answered with a plain language explanation of governance and a promise that the product safety rules would not be changed without clinical review. That response mattered more than the apology I had wanted. The correction gave users a way to understand who was responsible for the promises HavenLoop made. My father asked whether the company would survive. I told him survival was no longer something I could guarantee. I could guarantee only that the record would not be quietly rewritten again. He nodded. He had spent his life repairing machines. A loose bolt is not an insult, Nand, he said. It is a warning. I thought of the deleted credit page as a loose bolt. The launch had looked polished because no one had stopped to check what held it together. The next morning, the board removed him as CEO.
He kept a product role for 6 months under a transition plan.
Yoojin became interim chair.
The company published a correction that named the creators and described the app's hospital origin without turning my mother's illness into advertising.
The correction received less attention than the launch. That was fine. Accuracy rarely gets the loudest applause. 6 months later, HavenLoop released a new version with an origin page that could not be hidden. The release process was slower than the original launch. Every department had to review the history attached to its feature. The clinical team checked the wording of the medication alerts. The privacy team confirmed that the origin page did not expose my mother's medical details. The legal team verified every name against the source archive. Marketing complained that the approvals delayed the campaign by 2 weeks. I understood the complaint. A clean launch is easier when nobody asks who did what. But the delay revealed a better kind of speed. Once the records were correct, later decisions moved faster because people no longer argued from competing memories. The engineer knew which branch to trust. The lawyer knew which agreement applied. The support team knew who could answer a question about the safety logic. We invited 3 families from the hospital pilot to test the new onboarding. One family asked why the origin page used the word caregiver instead of guardian. Another asked whether a completed task could be corrected if someone had checked the wrong box. A third asked whether the app would preserve a family's history after a dispute. Those questions became features. We added a correction trail that preserved both the original entry and the reason for the change. We added a role setting for relatives who shared care without legal guardianship. We added an export function so a family could take its history with them rather than becoming dependent on the company. Joon had once said that investors wanted one simple founder story. The family showed us that users wanted the opposite: enough detail to understand what would happen when life became complicated. During the final rehearsal, the new launch screen displayed the names in a quiet line beneath the logo. No portraits, no heroic adjectives, just created by Joon Han, systems by Daeun Park, founded and scaled by Joon Han. I asked whether Joon had approved the wording. The product manager said he had not objected. That was not the same as agreement. But the line did not require his permission to be true. My mother watched the rehearsal from a chair near the exit. She had brought the old receipt in a plastic sleeve. When the screen changed, she held it up and asked whether the company wanted the original. The designer said the museum case would be safer than a desk drawer. We built a small display beside the origin page and placed the receipt inside. The ink was faint. The paper was ordinary. That was precisely why it mattered. Big companies often hide their beginnings behind polished images. Ours began with a hospital note, a tired daughter, an engineer who kept a mirror, and a brother who had to learn that a microphone was not authorship. After the event, I returned to the office alone. The repository opened on my screen. The source log did not celebrate anyone. It showed a sequence of choices, corrections, and tests. I added a final annotation to EHAN-0001. First Care Event Object, built for a family who needed the next step to be visible. Thrive. Then I closed the laptop. On the train home, I opened the old hospital photograph again. In the picture, my mother was asleep beneath a white blanket, and the edge of my laptop showed the first HavenLoop screen. I had taken the photograph because I was afraid I would forget how small the beginning was. The launch video had made the beginning look inevitable, as if a company had simply appeared around my brother's confidence. It had not been inevitable. It had been assembled through hundreds of ordinary decisions. A nurse asking for a clearer alert, Daeun refusing to hide a completed task, my father reading a color code, Joon finding a hospital willing to test a prototype, and me staying awake long enough to write one more rule. No single person could honestly claim the whole origin. That understanding changed how I spoke about the dispute. I stopped saying, "My brother took my app." I began saying, "The company published an authorship story that its own records did not support." The first sentence invited people to choose sides. The second invited them to inspect the sequence. A week after the correction, a student wrote to ask how to protect a project built with family members. I answered with the advice I wished I had followed. Write down each person's contribution while the work is still small. Keep the original files, define approval rights before funding, and never accept a promise to fix ownership later. Later is where unrecorded labor disappears. Another message came from a caregiver who said the app had helped her family speak about responsibility without blaming one another. She did not know about the board dispute. She only knew that the history feature let her show that she had completed a task before a prescription changed. I forwarded the message to Daeun. She replied with a single line. The source is still doing its job. I saved that line beside the commit log. The record had started as evidence against my brother, but it had become a design principle for the company, and a lesson for everyone who used it. My name was not on the launch screen because I had won a family argument. It was there because the work had been traced to its beginning, and because the people who benefited from the app deserved to know whose decisions shaped its promises. The next time HavenLoop launched a feature, I stood at the back of the room. The presentation named 6 contributors, including a support agent and 2 families. Nobody called the list dramatic. Nobody asked whether 6 names would confuse investors. The screen simply told the truth. When I reached my apartment, I placed the receipt beside the evidence folder instead of hiding it in the drawer. The paper no longer needed to be a weapon. It could be what it had always been: a beginning, a promise, and a reminder that the person who writes the first line deserves to remain visible when the story becomes successful. I kept the source log open one last time. The first commit had no applause, no investor, and no company logo. It had only a question: how can a family know what must happen next? The answer had grown into an app, then into a board dispute, then into a rule that protected people whose work was easy to rename. I shut down the screen, knowing the story had not ended with my brother's removal. It had ended with the record becoming stronger than any one person's version of the past. It showed the first receipt, the hospital spreadsheet, and a timeline of the prototype. It named me as product creator, Daeun as systems engineer, and Joon as the founding operator who secured the first pilot and built the early partnerships. The wording was precise. It did not make us friends. It made the company honest. The new governance policy required every major feature to include an authorship note, not a vanity credit, but a record of who designed the problem, who built the solution, and who tested it with users. The policy was uncomfortable at first. Teams had to discuss contribution before a launch, not after a dispute. Mira Cho became the repository steward. She created a public changelog for accessibility improvements. Daeun led a technical fellowship for engineers who came from caregiving backgrounds. Choi Hyun helped the Care Council write rules for consent and data privacy. My mother attended the launch of the new version. She sat in the front row with a pale green scarf. When the origin page appeared, she tapped the screen and said, "You remembered the color?" Thanked. I told her the color was never the important part. "It was to you," she said. "That is why it mattered." Unresolved. Joon did not attend the ceremony. He had left the company before the release. We were not reconciled. The family still carried the awkwardness of the dispute. Some relatives said I should have handled it privately. Others asked whether I was proud that I had forced my brother out. I learned to answer without defending my character. I did not force the source log to say anything. I said, "It only showed what happened." The app grew. A caregiver in Jeju used the history feature to notice a dangerous medication overlap. A family in Seoul used the transport calendar to share responsibility across 3 households. A hospice nurse told us that the neutral status labels prevented relatives from blaming one another when a task was missed. Those outcomes mattered more than the launch photograph. They also proved why accurate attribution was not a cosmetic issue. If the people who built the care logic could be erased, the company could erase the needs that logic represented. One afternoon, I opened the repository and searched for EHAN June-0001. The commit was still there. It created the first blank care event object. It was not elegant code. It was not scalable. It was a beginning. Beside it, Daeun's commit added synchronization. Beside that, June's later commit changed the palette. The sequence did not diminish him. It placed him where he belonged. I saved the log as a PDF and sent it to my mother. She replied with a photograph of the receipt where June had written, "If this works, people will know you made it." The ink had faded, but the sentence remained readable. I used to think the purpose of a source log was to prove that someone had lied. Now I understood its deeper purpose. It kept the future from inheriting the wrong story. My brother had launched my app without my name. I did not answer by shouting louder than him. I opened the record in the room where money, reputation, and responsibility had to meet. The investors read the source log. The company corrected its story. The app kept serving families. The following morning, the corrected page was still online. I checked the date, the names, and the archive link, then closed the browser, for the first time since the launch. Checking the record did not feel like preparing for another fight. It felt like opening a door that had finally been repaired. I saved a copy for the contributor archive and sent the link to Daeun. She replied with a green heart and the original test log. We did not need to explain the whole history again. The dates, the hashes, and the care notes were enough to hold it. I placed the archive receipt beside my mother's photograph. Both were ordinary objects, but together they told the truth of the beginning. Care became code. Code became a company. And the company had to learn that success never cancels authorship. The source log remained open in the archive, waiting for the next person who needed to trace a promise back to the work that made it possible. This time, nobody could quietly delete the beginning. I understood that preservation was not the same as revenge. The archive did not punish June. It prevented uncertainty from becoming power. Anyone could read the sequence, see the contribution, and decide for themselves. The app no longer depended on a family member remembering who had been in the room when the first line was written. And my name stayed where the work had always placed it, at the beginning.